Good morning, Dr. Azadgan, Nuri, Irish warrior. I'm going to introduce our guest. With us today from California, USA, we have Dr. Azadgan. He's a professor of business studies and international political economy, as well as the chief geopolitical counsel with Center for Geostrategic Studies. He is also a national security policy advisor to several world governments. Professor Azadgan's focus on the complex interconnectivities of the global north and the global south, specializing in international political economy, global business, military intelligence, security affairs, international relations, foreign policy formulation, geopolitical analysis, forecasting, as well as cultural, religious, and anthro-sociological aspects and angles of things that pertain to his above-mentioned academic specialties. He confronts global issues through a multidisciplinary knowledge base. His specific geographical regions of specialty are US, Europe, Southwest Asia, and Northeast Asia. Dr. Azadgan is also a member of the intellectual dark web, IDW, which is a loosely defined group of influential thought leaders and senior commentators who oppose political correctness, cancel culture, and identity policies in both higher education as well as the global news media in Western countries. He speaks 5 languages and is a proud American citizen. Professor Azadgan, thank you for sharing your time with us. We have several important questions that we would like to discuss with you. As agreed,
Go ahead. Thank you for your invitation. It's good to be with your audience today.
Thank you very much. We're very proud to have you, distinguished professor and doctor. So we made a list, as you and I agreed, that the topic of discussion would be, I have to read it now before I switch with you because it's on my background, a comprehensive geopolitical analysis on shadow wars, global north versus global south, BRICS, Shanghai Cooperation Organization, SCO, Russia-Ukraine war, Israel-Palestine war, Iranian elections, and interrelated subjects. So I will enlarge you now and you can start your lecture anywhere you want.
Okay. These are all very good topics. They're all interrelated. We have to look at the world as a whole. So I'll be going back and forth. And at any time, if the participants want to interrupt and ask questions, please do so. I don't want to just be lecturing here. I want it to be interactive Q&A. Before I start my commentary, Ellie, on these issues and answer your questions, I need to emphatically state that I'm not promoting anyone's propaganda in quotations. I'm an equal opportunity critic and a 100% financially and ideologically independent American scholar whose academic responsibility is to speak the truth and raise awareness. Having said that, my answers to your questions are presented solely as my personal opinion. Although based on many years of solid academic research, my opinions, assertions, and presuppositions should not be misinterpreted as a statement of supporting any person, any political cause, any organization, and or any country. I'm simply exercising my First Amendment right as an American citizen, which is freedom of speech and freedom of thought. I cannot emphasize this enough for the sake of clarity and basically fully uncensored independent academic discourse. So I repeat, this is my First Amendment right under the Constitution of the United States of America. Go ahead and ask me your first question again.
Doctor, I have to switch off again.
Mm-hmm.
It's on my background. Okay, first topic was a comprehensive geopolitical analysis on shadow wars.
Yes. Um, First of all, the material that I'll be presenting to you may cause original thoughts to develop and have you question your, program and indoctrinate way of thinking. That should be said. Now, talking about shadow wars, and this is interrelated to what we're going to talk about a little bit later, because the shadow wars that exist right now are between U.S. and Russia vis-a-vis Ukraine. Ukraine is being used as a proxy country by Washington, and I'll be using the word Washington instead of United States because the people running Washington in all these powerful lobbies are not doing the bidding of the American people. Washington itself has become a monster, and therefore I won't be insulting our American audience by using the word United States. These people do not represent us. They represent, like I said, powerful interest groups that are acting against the American people's interests. This is how huge this is. U.S., Washington, and Russia are engaged in a very nasty shadow war. There's stuff we cannot even go into in so many ways because they're protected by intelligence clauses. Last thing I heard is that they're using, and this has been fact checked, body parts from Ukrainian soldiers in organ selling. The Ukrainians themselves are doing that. So they recover the body of their dead soldiers or just recently passed, ready to go with bags of ice, in coolers and taking out these organs and selling them. Shadow war between Ukraine and Russia itself is based on corruption, money laundering, human trafficking, sex trafficking. These are all the things that the media and even alternative media doesn't really talk about. Extremely dark stuff. Not to mention the use of not chemical per se, but biological warfare between Ukraine and Russia, or we can say between Russia and the collective West when it came to the pandemic. The number of labs that we have in Ukraine is absolutely incredible. People can go ahead and Google research that. By the way, try to use DuckDuckGo instead of Google. I heard that security measures are much better than Google because people spy on Google. Sorry?
Duck.go?
Yeah, Duck, Go Duck or DuckDuckGo. I think it's DuckDuckGo. Use that search engine. At any rate, we have another shadow war between Washington and Iran, or shall we say between Washington, Iran, and Israel, which at this point is sort of morphing into a warm war since the Iranians attacked Israel vis-a-vis their drones, which was a response to Israel's attack against Iran's embassy. And that's really what it was. We keep hearing this word Iranian sort of consulate general in Damascus. The consulate general was really attached to the embassies, one and the same thing, which was absolutely unprecedented in the diplomatic history, at least in the past 8 years that we've had UN. And so they went ahead and struck. So we went from a shadow war or a cold war, or what we call LIC, low intensity conflict, into possibly becoming a high intensity conflict, which will be absolutely detrimental for the price of oil and natural gas, not to mention the grappling inflation that they're dealing with in this country. That would have been a disaster. You would never find me defending the Biden administration, or as the students these days call him, Genocide Joe. But I think Blinken and the rest of the people in that administration really restrained Netanyahu for him not to retaliate. Otherwise, the Iranians would have retaliated back, and then we have to rely on game theory algorithms to realize what's going to happen in the future. They were restrained, and the Biden administration publicly stated that take what you got as a victory because the Iranian missiles didn't, reach the destinations. It just happens to me that the most sensitive one and the most technologically advanced drones reach Israeli military installations. I'm not promoting war or conflict by any measure. War is when elephants fight and the grass suffers. And as Plato taught us, only the dead have seen the end of war. So we're not ideologues or unrealistic people promoting, holding up hands and singing Kumbaya. The peace business is extremely strenuous. We are talking involvement of lawyers and all sorts of academics in the House of Congress against lobbies. And then the exciting part is exposing these people that get, millions, hundreds throughout the years have been receiving hundreds of millions of dollars from various lobbies in Washington, whether that is the military industrial complex lobby, whether it's APAC, whether it's the prison industrial complex. This country is run by lobbies, not your so-called congressmen or congresswomen or senators. So we need to keep that in the back of our mind as we talk about these shadow wars that are popping up left and right all over the world. And like I said, the danger is that they would manifest and transform and devolve into a full-blown conflict. And the wars that we're going to be fighting, Ellie, in the near future will not be physical wars. It will start as cyber warfare. And it's unbelievable how unprepared we are for that. Nobody's got a home telephone line with a cord attaching to the wall. We're all on our cell phones. And God forbid, if there's a cyber warfare, our entire systems are susceptible. They could come down, and if there's an electromagnetic attack on our atmosphere, the estimates are that within a year, 90% of American population will die. So cyber warfare should be taken very seriously, but it will be a sort of like a harbinger before an actual physical war, which we don't forecast to happen anytime soon, other than superpowers fighting their wars in another country. Saudi Arabia fighting their wars, having fought their wars in Syria. US and Russia having fought their wars in Syria. Iran and Saudi Arabia fighting their wars in Yemen. Washington and Russia fighting the wars in Ukraine. God forbid these third countries where superpowers get to do their fighting in. And those countries will be decimated, as has been the case with Yemen and Syria. And God forbid Ukraine to come. We are not wishing for that. We are hoping that there would be adults in the room. Again, you would have never, ever found me saying anything positive about the Trump administration. I've been on record, global news channels, when he was a president. But it is my conviction, if we had Trump in the White House during the past 4 years, because of his good working relationship with President Putin and President Zelensky, and now, as you know, President Putin has just traveled to North Korea, sat down with Kim Jong-un. If we had him in the White House, he would have somehow negotiated these things before they manifest into a full war, which is what the Biden administration has been wanting. But just to be, fair and balanced, the Biden administration, even though they've been supporting Israel, billions of dollars have been going to Israel. They actually were instrumental in making sure the war between Iran and Israel didn't go full blast. Having said that, it takes two countries to want to have a fight. Israel, Mr. Netanyahu gets sexually aroused by Hamas and Iran because that's what keeps him in power, scaring the sweet feathery bejesus of the Israeli citizens. So he wanted that war. He was lusting after that war. But Iran didn't want that war because they knew they would be completely obliterated. And the constructive role that the Biden administration did, at least rhetoric-wise, although we are completely supporting Israel, that prevented what could have been a massive disaster in the world. If you think the inflation is bad, if there's a war, the price of petroleum can jack up to anywhere between $170 to $200. That would be immediate inflation, in addition to what we've been experiencing during the past terrible years of this Biden administration. So that was avoided. And I'll end this with this statistics. The last congressional package that was passed was $95 billion, with $61 billion going to Ukraine, $26 billion going to Israel, and $8 billion going to Taiwan. This is unprecedented, to pick a fight with Russia, with China. This is in the realm of lunacy, because China and Russia are not Iraq. They're not Libya or Iran. They won't be constrained. They won't be sitting back. They'll have their own plans. They will implement it. And that's what will, what I'm just talking about will take us to your second and third question.
Submarines atomic
Sorry?
submarines. Russia has already sent atomic submarines, 1 to Cuba, 6 in the Atlantic Ocean
Oh
as
yeah.
of last
Oh yeah.
week.
And President Putin is openly talking about using strategic field nuclear weapons, and you know, even that rhetoric, even talking like that is very dangerous. But you know, we're cornered him. The Russian bear is a you know, if you ever seen a bear or documentaries about bears, they're mostly you know, hibernating in caves. But God forbid you poke a hole at that bear will strike at you. And the lunacy that we're seeing from this administration, and in fact the entire deep state in Washington, is beyond me. Other than the fact that they want to start another war in order to make these countries in debt to U.S. vis-a-vis supporting them militarily, and that would somehow have or delay this $33 trillion debt that we have. I think that's their end game. World wars always start because of financial reasons. There's a line in the third and the final Godfather movies that says finance is also a weapon. Politics is knowing when to pull the trigger.
Yeah,
Doctor,
the Rothschild article, we should discuss it after our topics.
Sure.
Or a shadow economy to talk about.
right.
بفهمید.
دکتر میتونم خواهش کنم که فشارهایی که از طرف
We're
سیستم
doing English today, please.
oh I'm sorry. Okay. Okay. What is the personal pressure that you feel because of who you are and your influence and your knowledge, and its similarity to what U.S. is doing in camping, students in camping, and all the wars that they are carrying all around the world, the personal pressure that you feel from the system. What is the recent attack on you, if we could discuss it?
There's a lot of it that I cannot discuss on record, but they're basically going after people who are presenting a different narrative or the actual reality of what's going on. And, you know, since the Patriot Act, since that horrible, what I call the unpatriotic act that was passed literally after 9/11, it was already written. I mean, it's like this thick. Since that was passed in right a few days after 9/11, which it was prepared years before it, they're going after people for national security reasons, although that's not what they would state to you. But this is a systematic campaign of intimidation, trying to silence people. It's a form of psychological warfare. And all we can do is hope and pray that there are honorable men and women within the system who are still in pursuit of truth. You would never hear me defending anything about CIA, but CIA's motto comes from the Bible, which is the book of John, chapter 8, verses 32, which states, "Truth shall set you free." So we're hoping that men of honor, women of honor that are investigating us would have that in the back of their mind, and know that our interest, first and foremost, is to save the Republic, to save the United States. We are not, as I mentioned in the beginning of my lecture, we are not the voice of propaganda for any country, any organization, any person, or anything else for that matter. We are simply exercising our First Amendment rights. That used to be, by the way, Nuri, freedom of speech. I'm sorry, I said freedom of right. First Amendment right, which was freedom of speech, freedom of thought, and freedom of association. As academics, it's our moral responsibility to sit with everybody, as long as there's no financial transaction between us and whoever we're sitting with. That's the red line. That's the U.S. Treasury Department red line. We used to have freedom of association. Why? To be bridge makers between peoples and individuals and countries that want to obliterate each other. And I have to emphasize the word each other. In my opinion, chanting death to this country and death to that country does nothing to legitimize the political aspirations and causes of countries toward each other. It's undiplomatic and it's unconstructive, and God forbid it could become destructive. So therefore, we're hoping that somehow we will be able to have those rights in reality, instead of what we've been facing with during the past many years. It's not just what happened to me; it's what's happening since 9/11. The way they're going after academics and even diplomats and thought leaders. Was a certain professor. I'm not going to mention his name because it's very controversial in areas that I'm completely dismayed with him. But he had to go through social media training because of his stances against a certain lobby, let's say, that's destroying the future of our children in this world, and is being passed around or promoted as a form of human rights. You have to get social media sensitivity training. He's a Canadian citizen. I mean, this kind of stuff, which makes me wonder, where the hell is ACLU? ACLU used to stand up for something. They used to stand up for free speech to the point of defending the most scum, racist, the neo-Nazis. That's how much they believe in free speech. Where are they except being fixated and obsessed with issues of these children who are so narcissistic, who think they can change their gender every 20 minutes, and are completely fixated on issues like that, and they don't have the resources of protecting freedom of speech, which is fundamental to the exchange of ideas in our country. I'm afraid we're becoming like Europe, like Germany, like some of these countries where we can't even question certain presuppositions without getting legally charged. God forbid. We need to come up with alternatives to ACLU of attorneys who are alert, awake, and aware about what's going on, and come up with these new legal coalitions to defend us. There's an old saying that they came for the Jew, I didn't do anything. They came for the communists, I didn't do anything. They came for the socialists, I didn't do anything. They came for a human rights activist, I didn't do anything. They came after me, and there was nobody to defend me. We need to be very aware of that and motivate ACLU to once and for all stand up for all forms of free speech, not just certain issues that are related to certain people with sexual identity disorder.
How about IADL, International Association of Democratic Lawyers, that Nelson Mandela and Fidel Castro were president.
Exactly.
Lennox Hines.
Yeah. And the word international before anything, absolutely. When there was some water issues the water was unhealthy and extremely dangerous to drink in Washington, in the state of Michigan a few years ago when President Obama was in office, those citizens appealed to the UN. They said the hell with Washington and what, how they're not doing anything for us. They actually appealed to UN, in terms of human rights. I'm hesitant when you bring international bodies to sift through US domestic affairs, but God forbid if it comes to that, where we have to appeal to international bodies and even in the UN itself to defend our rights as they're being corroded and taken away. I never thought a day would come where an American president's house would be raided. I'm not defending President Trump by any stretch of the imagination, but you look at what's being happening to a former US president, that should be alarming to everybody who's in this business of speaking the truth, whether it's in the media or academia or both, in my case.
Iran once offered to monitor American elections, help monitor. That was a joke.
This is extremely controversial. An intervention of any foreign power in our domestic affairs should be dealt with in the utmost measure. Whether it was a so-called Russian collusion in our election, which was a complete farce, by the way, a complete farce. That was the operation by the Hillary Clinton mafia, and the rest of the Democratic establishment, and also so-called moderate Republicans who are going after this guy. An intervention by any foreign power, financially or otherwise, in our domestic affairs should be dealt with very seriously. Having said that, we have been interfering in every country's affair, as long as they have a resource that they're going after, whether it's lithium or petroleum or or natural gas, or any of these precious metals that go into all our high-tech gadgets. We've been doing that everywhere, all over the world, since we became an empire, which was right after we dropped those bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So nobody respects inconsistencies, but having the Chinese or the Iranians or the Venezuelans or the Russians or anybody else interfering in our so-called elections, which is really not elections, it's a selection process, is extremely serious and should be handled and dealt with in the most transparent way.
Yeah.
Okay, can I just ask, are we moving to the next topic? I want to get a couple of questions from my friend on panel, and somebody in the comments has some questions. Yes. Irish Warrior, do you have any comeback to what was discussed? Do you want to talk about anything?
Like between Russia and Ukraine and like China, Palestine, like anyone that's keeping an eye on the whole geopolitics kind of thing knows that it's all kind of tied up into one. But what I'm kind of more bit interested in was there was with Iran and Pakistan there a couple months back, they were hitting on opposite sides borders, but where they hit like was kind of very suspicious, where the Americans were kind of I think I seen it described as another state of America. Like, what way do you think Pakistan lies at the moment?
Pakistan is in such turmoil they haven't experienced in decades. Pakistan is really run by the Pakistani army. Their latest prime minister, his name will come to me in a few seconds, Imran Khan, is extremely popular in that country, and perhaps the least corrupt of the Pakistani politicians that that country has been experiencing for decades. Corrupt to the bone. The incident between Iran and Pakistan was staged most likely by CIA, implemented through Saudi operatives and the terrorists, our terrorists over there. Yes, we do support terrorists all over the world. Most people should know that. Taliban was our proxy to stand up against the Northern Alliance of Ahmed Shah Massoud in Afghanistan. ISIS is our proxy. Some of the most experienced and savage like ISIS terrorists were moved from Syria and Iraq into Afghanistan for two reasons: to destabilize the Iranian northeast province of Khorasan, and also to create division and discord between Taliban itself, or to counter Taliban if Taliban gets uppity. I wrote a paper on that not too long ago. I presented it at an Ojai Peace Vigil. Unfortunately, everything that I forecasted came true. Now, as far as Iran and Pakistan, Saudi Arabia has had a long history of interfering in that area. This most southern province, southeastern province of Iran is called Baluchistan. It's the majority Sunni. Saudi Arabia has been trying to create a lot of discord between these Sunnis and the central government and the rest of Iran, for that matter. And it's one of these places that when they drew the borders, half of the province was in Iran, the other half was in Pakistan. I'm talking about the province of Baluchistan. Sistan, Iranians call it Sistan and Baluchistan. In Pakistan, it's simply referred to as Baluchistan, and they have their own, sort of ethnic identity. So if they want to start a war, another sort of Kurdistan situation, Baluchistan would be another region like that. Kurdistan, as you know, this great country, this concept of, let me finish, please. This concept of Kurdistan falls in 4 countries: Iran, Turkey, Syria, and Iraq. It's a trigger box. It's a thing, you can totally bring down the whole thing, provoking that identity, as the Israelis have been doing. Same thing is with Azerbaijan. You have the country of Azerbaijan, and in Iran's borders, you have East Azerbaijan and West Azerbaijan provinces. Essentially, the entire Azerbaijan was part of the Iranian sort of country, and up until 150 years ago, and before that, one of the satrapies of the Persian Empire for thousands of years. So Saudi Arabia, because of the rapprochement with Iran and the peace process with Iran vis-a-vis, thanks to China's intervention, they backed out a little bit from intervening in Iranian affairs. But you know, Washington is very quick to jump right back in and just do the job themselves. And luckily, with the diplomatic skills of the recently deceased Iranian foreign minister Hossein Amir Abdullahian, who was very instrumental in avoiding war in several fronts. Iran and the country of Azerbaijan went into war a couple of years ago. And this situation with Iran and Pakistan was extremely detrimental. Thanks to shuttle diplomacy, not to mention bringing Iran and Saudi Arabia together, that war between, or conflict between Iran and Pakistan was controlled and turned into a LIC, limited intensity conflict. And Israel wanted that war because Israel wants to have Iran be engaged militarily in several fronts on its borders. One with Azerbaijan, one with Pakistan, one with even Afghanistan themselves. Taliban has been saying since we brought them into power, and Qataris have been very uppity with Iran, talking about cutting the water of the Helmand River to Iran. So there's multiple fronts that Iran is fighting, and I think these are all harbingers and conditions that Israel is trying to create, and Washington. So when the actual war between Iran and Israel or Iran and Washington takes place, Iran would be weak because it would be fighting several fronts. Go ahead, Ellie.
Okay, they're talking about a greater Khorasan, the separatists, and we have a pan-Turkish in Azerbaijan area. There are all these sorts of separatist activities. So that. And I move to the next topic. Norwegian has something to say. And I have somebody down here who has a few questions. I think in one of the next topics you can address it, please. One is, how do you feel about Hamid Nouribi, please? I'm not sure who that is. And then
I'm sorry, Hamid who?
Nouri. I don't know who that is.
I'm not familiar.
I think in Sweden they arrested some Iranian guy, and then he was released. And then about gas and oil in Gaza, when we talk about Israel and Gaza, please address her question.
Yes. I don't know who this Hamid Nouri is, but the Swedes, Scandinavians, and the French, and many other European countries have been instrumental in the past 40 years or so, supporting one of the most vile expat groups. I don't even want to say Iranian expat because they're not even worthy to be called Iranian. These are Saddam Hussein mercenaries or CIA mercenaries, Saudi mercenaries in some area, in some operations, called MKO, Mujahideen Khalq organizations. They did play some key roles in toppling the dictator, the Shah of Iran, in the 1979 revolution, but they're sort of like morphed into this cult, literally a cult. Al Jazeera many years ago did a 20-minute documentary about these people, and you can Google it, and hopefully it'll still be up. In 20 minutes, they describe the monsterish behavior of this cult, that it's like a political cult, sexual cult, sociological cult, if you may, religious cult. And European countries have been supporting these people, and now they're on steroids supporting these people. And they're the most hypocritical group. That's why in Persian they're not called Mujahideen. Mujahideen literally in Persian and Arabic can be translated as holy warriors. And I put holy in parentheses. Most wars in the past, God knows how many centuries of human existence have been over God. This angry, despotic, murderous, genocidal God that we see so much, especially in the Old Testament. And I'm referring to the God it's a God that calls people, calls on Joshua. Joshua was a prophet after Moses, to go and just kill people, call them Amalekites and go kill people. Thank God we have UN. That behavior is called genocide. And it could be prosecuted at the ICC as we are trying to have it done. But going back to your topic, these MKO people are called munafiqin, which literally means hypocrites. They're so hypocritical that right now they're actually supporting the money they get from us, from United States taxpayers and European taxpayers. They're supporting one of the most right-wing, fascist, Islamophobic parties called Vox, VOX, in Spain, trying to get these people to come into power. Go figure. We are told this is an Islamist, Marxist group. They're not adherents of true Islam, neither are they true Marxists. They're political prostitutes and mercenaries. Their military operation is based in Albania. Albania has been trying to kick him out thanks to Iranian pressure, and now there's talk about moving them to Canada. So that's probably who this Ahmad Nouri is connected to or not. I'm not sure if they're familiar with that guy, but I'm talking about MKO, which is not really a serious challenge in toppling and destabilizing Iran, but their rapid expeditionary force, asymmetrical warfare they practice to topple Iran. Before I move up from that topic, people need to know that at the end of Iran-Iraq war, which ended in a very uncomfortable truce between these two countries, where close to 1 million people died. We don't know the exact numbers. The estimates are around 1 million people. The war which Iran lost, by the way, most people don't talk about that. Iran did lose that war, although Iran 5 years later won the Iran-Iraq war thanks to us going into Iraq, toppling Saddam Hussein. So they got their victory 5 years later. But at the end of that war, Saddam Hussein violated the truce to demoralize the Iranian army. Soldiers who are all reporting back to their bases all over the country, and attacked them from behind, shot them from behind. And had it not been for a special Iranian army, not just IRGC, but Iranian army special forces who used light helicopters in defeating these people and shoving them back into Camp Ashraf in Iraq, in the suburbs of Baghdad, these people could have gone all the way to Tehran and topple Iran and been coming into power. They were equipped by the Russian T-72 tanks and light infantry divisions, rapid expeditionary force helicopters. So they were going to fight an asymmetrical war, extremely effective. And they were, at that time, they were very powerful. Now their operations are coming apart. The average age in their cyber army command in Albania that I've seen pictures of, people are elderly. The youth of Iran are not taking that poison pill and joining this group anymore. But in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, a lot of Iranian youths were brainwashed and joined that organization. One of the controversial points of the recently deceased Iranian president, Ebrahim Raisi, was that there was a summary execution after this MKO operation at the end of Iran-Iraq war against Iran, and around 3,000 people were summarily executed. He was the chief judiciary of Tehran at that time, Ebrahim Raisi. Iranian estimates are 3,000, and MKO propaganda estimates are 8,000 to 10,000. Nobody really knows. But it is being said that those are, and I'm putting it in quotation, that's what they say, extrajudiciary executions. But the conditions of the world were different at that time, so these things could be committed. But of course, in today's world, they're absolute niche, as the Germans would say, absolute no, and it cannot happen. But they're a propaganda force to be reckoned with. Their 70-year-old leader, this woman named Maryam Rajavi, we are told has cancer and suffers from panic attacks, and we are told she was quite possibly recently hospitalized in France. We don't know. We're not. We haven't verified that information. This was leaked several days ago. I think it was Iranian PSYOP, psychological warfare. Some renegade so-called reporters in IRNA, the official Iranian news agency, Islamic Republic news agency, broke this story. We think it was propaganda, but the woman is in trouble, and I don't wish ill on anybody, but there's several people that I hope die from the worst type of cancers. One of them would be this Maryam Rajavi, another one would be Bibi, Benjamin Netanyahu, and in the distant third would be this mercenary so-called journalist, Masih Alinejad, which I hope would get the worst form of cancer and die slowly. They are some of the most wicked, evil, demonic people that exist in this world. These three of them. I don't mean to bring her name into this, but it's just three people that I pray daily for their immediate but slow exit from the world, because they're doing the bit of Satan himself. They're from the pits of hell. So let's move on to the next topic.
Okay, let's
Oh, the pipeline, the pipeline and the tremendous amount of natural gas off of the coast of Gaza. Yes, this is true. Tremendous amount of natural gas, is under the Mediterranean, Eastern Mediterranean, off of the coast of Gaza, Israel itself, and Lebanon. I'm going up north, and Syria. Syria was engaged in the civil war since 2011. They couldn't really develop those fields. As you know, natural gas is the cleaner form of fossil fuel. It's the transitionary form of fuel before we go into some other form, which probably would be solar, if you ask me. We don't have those infrastructures. But natural gas is much cleaner than petroleum and coal, and tremendous amounts of it are discovered. There's one field off of the coast of Israel called Leviathan. People think, what is this important of this area in the world? Israel, Palestine, Lebanon. People often go into religious grounds, Holy Land this, or God assigned this country to these people. Last time I checked, God wasn't a real estate agent. It all comes down to geopolitics. This is where three continents meet: Asia, Africa, and Europe, literally. They meet in this land we call Israel, Palestine. That's really what's all behind it. And if these fields are developed, Israel would be one of the top natural gas exporters. And the reason I say it's geographically important is because the biggest natural gas market in the world is the European market, the European continent of 741 million people. Keep that number in mind. So they will have tremendous, and it's right there. The transportation cost from Israel, Palestine to Europe is minimal compared to Russian expense, which Russians are not allowed to import or export natural gas to Europe anymore. But it is detrimental. That's why they went to Gaza. Hamas is created by Israel. This is on record. At a 2019 the Likud party meeting, this was more or less admitted. People ask me when I go on their shows, do you condemn what Hamas did on October 7th? Is Hamas a terrorist organization? Absolutely, it is a terrorist organization. It's Israel's terrorist organization. Now, people say it's not or have hope for Hamas because they say PLO started that way. PLO started as a terrorist organization. It was terrorism back then was a little different than what we think of today. And so there's hope for Hamas because they're going to turn into a future PLO. No, they're a vile terrorist organization supported by Israel. And like I said, Netanyahu on a daily or hourly or minutely basis is aroused sexually by Hamas because there's a dynamic between Hamas existing and being created to justify all the savagery that Israel is committing. They're obsessed. Every word comes out of their mouth is Hamas this, Hamas that. And so that's what I want to go into that. Having said that, Hamas did democratically get elected in 2005 because Fatah, which is the new name for PLO, are so extremely corrupt that people say, okay, we're just going to go for Hamas. We're not going to go for Fatah. And that itself was also an Israeli operation to create a sort of a rift between West Bank and Gaza. So this whole thing is about natural gas. This whole thing is about creating the first smart city, if you may. The correct word is really total police state or surveillance city. We call it smart city. In that area of the world, in Gaza, they're leveling it to the ground so they could have access to annex Gaza as part of Israel under the guise of, the terrorists are gonna be there, Hamas is gonna attack us anytime. Hamas gave Israel that opportunity for it to attack Gaza. And the majority of Palestinians living in Gaza today were not even born when Hamas was democratically, if you may, elected into that little area of the world. There was a talk going back to the gas pipeline thing, this entire Syrian conflict with ISIS and these other savage terrorist groups that were created by us, Saudi Arabia and Turkey and Qatar, was to avoid this pipeline going from the biggest natural gas in the world is shared between Qatar and Iran in the southern shores of the Persian Gulf. 1/5 of it falls into the Iranian territorial water, and another 4/5 falls into Qatari territorial waters. The Qataris were given the most advanced technology by us several decades ago to extract that natural gas. Qatar is the top 5 exporters of natural gas, extremely rich and efficient country. And so the 1/5 of it falls in the Iranian territorial waters. Iran and Qatar sort of became sort of strange allies in order to stand up to Saudi Arabia. So the idea was that the Qataris, that's why they were supporting ISIS, was for their natural gas to go through pipelines from Qatar through northern, southern, Saudi Arabia,